A report this week by His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary into last summer's riots sparked by the murder of 3 young girls in Southport has concluded there was no link to the far right. That's despite the Prime Minister saying this in August.
I won't shy away from calling it what it is. Far-right thuggery.
OK, so the report said, during our inspection, we found no conclusive or compelling evidence that the 2024 disorder was deliberately premeditated and coordinated by any specific group or network. Most people who took part in the disorder lived locally. I'm now joined by the Director for Free Speech Union, Toby Young. Hello, Toby. There were far-right people there, evidently. I mean, I could see it from footage, but the narrative that went out there was that this was some kind of far-right uprising, national.
Yeah. At the time, Keir Starmer and others were very anxious to present the disorder as being organised by far-right agitators from outside the areas where the rioting was taking place, rather than just a spontaneous, organic expression of anger about the Southport murders and about uncontrolled mass immigration. And part of that official narrative was it's the far-right spreading misinformation as well, which is prompting these outbreaks of disorder. Nothing to do with actual discontent, public anger about the government's failure to control immigration and protect our borders. No, it was just the far-right manipulating credulous, ordinary people, which was, as we now know, nonsense. And I think it's quite important because one of the consequences of that particular narrative being spread by the Prime Minister on down was that Muslims in these communities became convinced that these far-right political agitators were moving into their areas to try and launch attacks on mosques and local Muslim community centres.
I mean, a mosque was attacked.
A mosque was attacked, yeah, but it wasn't organised by people from outside the area. I mean, this report makes that clear. But these Muslim community groups, having been persuaded by the Prime Minister that these outside agitators were coming into their areas and organising attacks on mosques and community centres, they began to organise sort of counter mobs and actually participated in rioting themselves.
Taking up arms.
People
were attacked. I believe there was a man who had surgery afterwards, who was in a beer garden.
So you could argue that Keir Starmer actually was guilty of spreading harmful misinformation, which the government has made an offence under the Online Safety Act. It's now it's called the something like the false communications offence, and the maximum penalty is 2 years. If you're found guilty of deliberately spreading misinformation, which you know to be false and which causes harm, then you can go to prison for 2 years. I think at the very least, 6 police officers should turn up at 10 Downing Street and haul Keir Starmer down to Scotland Yard for an 8-hour interview.
Yeah. Do you think he's got a lot of Douglas Murray books?
I don't think he doesn't have many Brexity books, no. So
I mean,
he might get
it wasn't just Keir Starmer. There was a narrative online that spread the Hope Not Hate, the leader of that organisation. He put out a tweet, misinformation about a Muslim woman, being a victim of an acid attack. And that was just not true. I'm not saying that he knew it was not true, but that was just not true. Also putting out this narrative that the far right were organising online. And so you had all these kind of supposed counter-protests going on where people were rocking up, and then there wasn't any far right there. The whole thing was misinformation. And actually you had incitement to violence even at some of those where people who were ostensibly there being anti-racist were actually invoking violence.
Yes. I mean, I think it's a rule of thumb now that if someone in a position of authority, particularly someone on the progressive left, accuses the far right of spreading misinformation, actually it's a form of projection. And the people guilty of spreading misinformation, and in this case harmful misinformation, were the authorities.
This video is sponsored by Saily. Saily is a brand new eSIM service app. What it does is get you a local SIM card that you can use when you're travelling, so you don't have to pay those crazy roaming fees just to send a text back home. They've got eSIM plans in over 160 countries and 8 regions, so pretty much wherever you're going, they'll be able to make sure you're connected. So how does it work? Well, all you've got to do is hit our link in the description to download the app. It will work on iOS or Android. buy a plan. You can choose the best time frame for you, and then just install the eSIM on your phone. When you land at your holiday destination, you can activate your plan instantly. Saily eSIMs only ever have to be installed once, so when you go on your next trip, you just buy a plan for a new country, turn that eSIM back on, and just like that, you could be watching the GB News YouTube channel. You can be connected anywhere you go, and you don't have to deal with patchy Wi-Fi in your hotels. So get sorted for your next trip by downloading Saily using the link in the description below, and if you use our code NEWS at checkout, you'll get an exclusive 15% discount on us.
And the other thing is, I guess, is that that having this bogeyman in a way, as to be able to put all of the focus onto, as opposed to looking at some of the real issues and because there were people out there who were out there protesting, just genuinely protesting, not rioting, but out there in frustration from what they've seen, and with various issues, including migration, but also they're mourning this terrible tragedy.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the governing elite's strategy for dealing with dissent. However well-based that dissent is, they try and characterise it as misinformation, as disinformation, as far-right, as beyond the pale, outside the Overton window, anything rather than actually engage in a defence of the policies which people are actually unhappy about. I mean, why couldn't the government actually make a decent fist of defending mass immigration, multiculturalism, the housing of asylum seekers in these different northern towns? Why not actually come out and defend the policy instead of just trying to castigate anyone who challenges it as a kind of far-right agitator who deserves to be sent to prison?
Do you think that narrative is working anymore? By just calling everybody far-right, it lessens the actual impact?
No, we saw from Reform's success in the local elections last week that this attempt to demonise dissenters as far-right, to cast them as beyond the pale, that as a strategy for protecting the hegemony of the kind of liberal governing elite is counterproductive. It doesn't work. It just makes people angrier and angrier.
Yeah, well, your organisation, Free Speech Union, is involved in a plethora of cases, some of them reaching national attention at the moment. I think probably the biggest one is connected to what we're talking about, is Lucy Connolly.
Yeah, so Lucy Connolly is the wife of a Conservative councillor, the mother of one, had never been in trouble with the police before. On the day of the Southport murders, she was very upset. She had lost a child and so felt it very acutely when these 3 schoolgirls were murdered. And she put out a very intemperate, even nasty tweet. And she then went for a walk, had second thoughts, came home, deleted it. It was only up for a few hours, but long enough for her to be reported to the police. She was arrested and charged with intentionally stirring up racial hatred, and I think rather unwisely pled guilty. The Free Speech Union were in touch with her and we advised her to plead not guilty, but I think she'd been given the impression that if she pled not guilty, she'd get quite a light sentence. She'd be home in time for Christmas instead of kept on remand for months while she was awaiting trial. So she pled guilty and she got 31 months. Now, some of the people who led the Muslim mobs participating in the riots. There was one particular man who attacked a pub, led a kind of baseball bat-wielding mob. There were terrified women and children in that pub. A man outside the pub was beaten up. He got 20 months. So Lucy Connolly, who just tweeted something, got 31 months. Even someone convicted of being a member of a rape gang, convicted of sexual assault against a child, got 30 months, 1 month less than Lucy Connolly when all she did was tweet. So we're helping her appeal her sentence, which we think was way too harsh, and the appeal's being heard at the Royal Courts of Justice next week on Thursday. We're going to be there, the Free Speech Union staff holding up placards saying, "Police our streets, not our tweets."
So people can come down.
People can come down and protest outside the RCJ.
There's another case that's also going on. Well, first of all, we just saw something, it's been in the news today, about the retired police officer. That story is insane.
That's insane, yeah. I mean, what he tweeted doesn't come anywhere close to being a criminal offence. And he was
protecting Jewish people.
Ex-special constable
Yeah.
for Kent Police. You would have thought they would have cut him some slack. But no, 6 police officers turn up on his doorstep, ransack his house, make disparaging remarks about the books on his bookshelf, even say something seemingly pretty heartless about his daughter who died in a hit-and-run accident 15 years earlier, hauled him down to the station, imprisoned him in a cell for 8 hours before letting him go. And they only let him go when he agreed to accept a caution because he was worried if he didn't, he'd get a criminal record and he wouldn't be able to visit his other daughter who lives in Australia. I mean, absolutely shocking case. And the police have now admitted that it was a mistake. They've deleted the caution, and I think this morning the Chief Constable of Kent Police called him to apologise. But that's not good enough. The police need to be sued for... It's taken 2 years and a Telegraph story before they bothered to apologise. They need to be sued for wrongful arrest and for depriving him of his liberty. And so the Free Speech Union is going to help him bring that case against Kent Police. We've just launched a crowdfunder to cover his legal expenses. If anyone wants to donate, go to freespeechunion.org and you'll be directed to it's Julian Fuchs, his fundraiser. But we hope we can get him some substantial compensation, which is nothing less than he deserves.
Do you think the police are going to learn their lesson?
Well, I think the only way...
These cases just keep on happening.
The only way they're going to learn is if you successfully sue them for wrongful arrest and they have to pay out tens of thousands of pounds to the victims of these witch hunts. Then maybe they'll think twice before doing it again.
Yeah, and another case that we also mentioned earlier in the show is the person who's volunteering for the train stations, who's like a doctor train station, and then they've said, no, we don't want to be part of it.
Matthew Toomer, I mean, another member of the Free Speech Union, another Free Speech Union case. Absolutely extraordinary. A gay man who is volunteering at a railway station because he loves trains and wanted to make sure that Redditch Station was well kept up. And, he asked a perfectly innocent question about whether the Progress Pride livery that West Midlands trains had been kind of festooned with. I mean, they were all completely repainted. I mean, he was just like, is this just going to be for Pride Month or is it going to be year-round now? And why do you feel you ought to kind of virtue signal in this way? Not everyone actually, even gay people, some of them have reservations about the Progress Pride flag because it seems to endorse the entire trans agenda, and lots of people, regard themselves as part of the LGB community, but not the T community as well.
Well, they consider the T element of it actually homophobic because it seeks to redefine being gay as same-gender attracted as opposed to same-sex attracted.
So his asking that question wasn't homophobic. It wasn't because he's a bigot. It was a perfectly proper, legitimate question. But just for asking that question, he was told his services were no longer required. Go home, don't come back. Your values, they conflict with ours. I mean, absolutely incredible. What about the value of free speech? What about the value of open discussion? What about the value of not penalising people for asking perfectly legitimate questions?
Well, said they've some social media posts that don't ally with their ideologies, but then they weren't able to identify what they were. They were probably horrific stuff like men and women cannot change sex.
I mean, that can get you into trouble, as you know, Josh. Quite an extraordinary story. And we're hoping to persuade West Midlands Trains to let him come back and continue to keep Redditch looking nice for commuters.
Absolutely. Well, anyway, lots going on. And of course, as we've mentioned a few times, but if you want to support what you're doing at Free Speech Union, I'm a member. I've got many cases that I need to speak to you about personally. Then, join online. It's invaluable, the service that you're doing. So.
Yeah, and it's cheap as chips. It's only £60 a year.
60 quid!
And if you're a student or a pensioner or on benefits or a veteran, then it's only 30 quid. And when you get into trouble, believe me, you'll be grateful that you spent that money.
Absolutely, and hopefully it's tax deductible as well for me. So that is the director of the Free Speech Union, Toby Young. Thank you very much for coming in.